A wealthy family moved into Key West, Florida in 1896 to 1897. Mr. and Ms. Otto were well known to be cruel and abusive to their servants. Their youngest child, Robert Eugene, also called Gene and born in 1900, was always watched by a certain older bohemian servant girl. The girl was treated the worst of all the servants because Gene adored her and thought of her as a best friend. Because of the abuse, the girl was planning revenge on the Otto family. She stayed up late at night, secretly creating a special present for Gene for his 6th birthday. The Otto family didn't know that the servant girl practiced voodoo. And this is where Robert the doll was born. The servant girl sold the doll by hand, adding a porcelain head to it. It was believed she had put a curse on the doll, filling the doll with evil relics and very tiny animal bones. At the time, it was a very nice doll, new, shiny, and sewn with a lot of craft work. The next day, she gave Gene the doll, with hugs and smiles, and Gene was very happy for the wonderful gift. He was, after all, a playful little boy. Gene decided to call the doll by his real name, Robert, and the name has stuck ever since. As time went on, the Ottos noticed something very strange and wrong with their son. Gene was so fascinated with his new doll. Gene would spend hours alone in his room, all alone, talking to Robert. What puzzled the Ottos even more was that they could hear answers, a voice that was completely different from their son's. When Gene went to sleep in the evening, he would always awake the family with his screams of fright. And when Mr. and Ms. Otto got to his room, they would find Gene's furniture overturned, and Gene in his bed, trembling in the center of it all. Trembling in the center of it all, Robert would be sitting upright at the end of Gene's bed, glaring at Gene's parents. The little boy shouted, "Robert did it! Robert did it! Robert did it!" Then things got worse. As conflict became frequent in the house, or if Gene ever misbehaved, the little boy would always have the same person to blame. "It was Robert," he sobbed. "Robert did it! Robert did it!" When Gene's father died, Gene got the will of the house, and he moved into his family's home. He got married and had a wife named Annette, otherwise known as Anne, and becoming a famous artist, now calling himself his middle name, Eugene Otto. Eugene Otto always preferred to do his artwork alone, secluded with Robert at his side, taken to it as if the doll could speak back. Eugene's wife, Anne, never liked the doll from the first time Eugene introduced it to her. It gave her the chills just to look at it, and she hated how obsessed her husband was with it. It frightened her in some way. Eventually, even though it deeply upset Eugene, Anne told her husband she was going to give Robert a room of his very own. in the attic, which is where he stayed for a few years. Those years later, Eugene spoke up. He repeated over and over again, warning his wife how angry Robert was. Eugene even demanded that Robert have his own room, a proper room with a view. The guest room that looked out above the street. Anne disagreed greatly, but gave up the fight to please her husband. Kids walking by Eugene's house to school always looked straight ahead, for each day they saw Robert leaning face down up against the guest room window on the 3rd floor, glorying at them, mocking them, and dancing around. Inside the house, Eugene and Anne's marriage was slowly deteriorating. Eugene was screaming and lashing out at his wife, smashing things, and running around the house like a madman. And then, all of a sudden, he was fine, back to himself again. And he always apologized with the same statement. "It was Robert, Anne. Robert did it." Anne had finally begun to question her husband's sanity. A plumber working on the house, who was allowed to take a rest in the upstairs guest room, ran screaming from the house. He said he heard the doll giggling and saw him scowling at him. In the early 1970s, Eugene became ill. Instead of spending time with his wife and expecting her comfort, he locked himself all alone in the guest room, with Robert by his side. In 1972, Eugene died in the guest room, obviously, with Robert beside him. Anne, relieved but heartbroken, quickly sold the house and left. But not before leaving Robert behind, stored buried under what seemed like a million boxes. Several years later, another family bought the home. Shortly after moving in, the new family discovered Robert, nearly squashed beneath the boxes, which probably resulted in one of his broken off ears. The couple of this new family took one look at Robert and knew that they didn't want something like this in their new lifestyle and home. The 10-year-old daughter of the family surprisingly liked the doll and added it to the collection of her China dolls and stuffed animals. It didn't take long for the family to realize that was obviously something very wrong with the doll. Like Eugene, the little girl would wake up in the middle of the night, screaming and crying. She said she saw Robert running and jumping up and down around her room, then climbing on her bed and attacking her. To this day, after more than 30 years, this woman, now in her 40s, still claims the doll was alive and wanted to kill her. Shortly after this occurrence, the family got rid of it for good and brought it to the Key West, Florida Martello Museum. Now Robert is displayed in a glass case for all visitors to see his scary face.